So once again, thank you so much for you guys for doing this interview. I was really looking forward to doing this. So what I would like to do is say hello. Thank you so much for doing this, guys. I loved Who Killed Avril Lavigne. And that is such a weird way of saying that when I say it out loud. But I wanted to get a chance to know you guys, and I would love to share everything about you guys to the world, which I've already done. So let's kind of start off with introducing yourselves and your involvement in this crazy podcast.
My name's Andy, and I wrote the project. I wrote Who Killed Avril Lavigne.
Okay, I'm Ben, and I was the sound designer and wrote the songs and played voice of Derek. And yeah.
Hey, I'm Duncan. I directed the project and helped develop it with Andy and Ben. We also all acted as producers, which we don't really say enough because I think it didn't feel like it. I think we all just kind of were doing it, but we were all three producers. And then I worked on the release of the show as well, and did some voices on the pod, did some singing, and wrote one of the mini episodes. And so just wore a couple different hats, but directing the show, releasing the show were, I think, were my big duties.
Duty. You said duties. I have to say that kind of joke because that's the kind of humor this podcast delivers, which satisfies my totally juvenile side. Because I swear to gosh, you guys, this podcast was beyond hilarious. The quality was amazing. I mean, you guys kept saying it that, it was done in someone's bedroom and it was just kind of like almost like a DIY, but top notch. But I have to talk about what the heck the podcast is about. So how do we even summarize this crazy podcast? It's just something about a guy in the future who wants to be a pop punk, because who doesn't? But he's in a world that no one likes pop punk. And then he gets transported through a porta potty with the most amazing sound effects I've ever heard in my life into 2005 Warped Tour. And shenanigans ensue.
Totally.
I mean, I remember hearing vaguely about the Avril Lavigne conspiracy. Can you guys share about that? And is that what started the inspiration, or did that just come along later?
Totally. That was definitely part of the main inspiration when we started. This project originally started off as a stage show, probably, I think about 6 years ago now. 6 or 7 years ago now. It premiered originally in like a theater festival, literally called the Bad Theater Festival. It was like a super low budget 30-minute project, but like sort of the central plot element in the show has always been this alleged murder and replacements, or cloning and replacement. There are variants of the theory, but basically this long-standing internet conspiracy that started on like a Brazilian fan site that Avril has been replaced with a lookalike named Melissa. There's all sorts of lore about it. We really only touch on like the tip of the iceberg about the theory and use it for our own dramatic means, but it's a whole world unto itself. People get very into it.
I actually didn't hear that her name was Melissa.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how did you even stumble into it? Were you just bored looking at the forum? Did someone tell you? How'd you guys even find out about it?
That's a great question. I mean, I think it was just one of those things that, like, for me, I think it sort of came to prominence, and like, I don't know the exact, etymology of when it erupted, but I think it's around like 2010, 2011, which is like around when, we were all undergrads in college, and it was just like a sort of thing that you heard in a dorm room, that like somebody was like, Avril Lavigne would be playing and somebody would be like, oh my God, have you heard that theory that I saw on Tumblr or whatever? And then it was just like sort of, it was like a literal meme, like a verbal meme that, spread amongst people.
Man, you guys have been hanging with cool people, because every time I said, oh, I like Avril Lavigne, they're like, really? No one shared with me conspiracy theories.
Had you heard about the conspiracy theory before listening to our podcast?
I did.
It was like I guess like it was weirdly like that conspiracy theory to me feels like a projection of our humankind onto like, basically we all collectively had a premonition that things were gonna get very weird soon, like with 2016. And so we were like, okay, the thing that we cherished from our childhood, that was a lie. Put it up on the internet as a conspiracy theory. And I don't know, that just, you know. So I think like wanting to go back and use that and then redeem that thing in our past with this story. Maybe subconsciously that was a part of it, you know?
That is such a deep, way deeper explanation than I expected.
Oh, I love Ben just like nailing the laps as he rattles off wisdom here in his apartment. It's great.
But wasn't that like pop punk? Like we're all crazy, like listening to this music, and yet conspiracy theories, like doom and gloom, and what was that? My favorite one was the Rugrats conspiracy. Was that like they were all dead?
Right.
But in fact, like that was a thing. Like they were all dead.
Yeah, I mean it's funny.
We were preparing ourselves.
It sort of like did precede like the whole sort of spin-off origin story phenomenon that exists now is like people becoming obsessed with these conspiracy theories and it's like, oh, it's actually about this other thing. So yeah, maybe there's just a moment in culture where we were all.
Is there going to be a stage version of this happening? Because that would be hilariously awesome. Like again, like tour. I say tour. U.S. tour.
I mean, if the people demanded it, we would have no choice. But I mean, the last version of this that ran, we were actually very, very proud of that production. It was like it was about, I think, like a 70-minute, 60-minute, 70-minute stage musical, and then afterwards there was live band pop punk karaoke where you could like pick out of a catalog of all your favorite songs and like get up on stage and sing with a live band. It was so fun. And we were like,
I'm so mad I wasn't there. This has to happen again.
I know, it really was the most fun. It was a blast. But I mean, it is the good news is that it's being translated into German and being performed in Germany in 2023. They found out about the show somehow through some of the press we got, and that's been in the works for like a year and a half now.
I gotta say, like, I really was impressed with the sound of this podcast, especially with the music and the impersonations. From someone who grew up during that time, I mean, I was too poor to go to Warped Tour, but I did listen to like every single band you guys impersonated. Although I gotta say, you guys kind of did good Charlotte a little bit dirty.
We did good Charlotte dirty.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I'm a huge good Charlotte fan.
Oh, us too. In fact, like we literally love all these bands so much. That's why we did the whole podcast.
You could have Benji a little bit more gangster. Like that was his whole thing, was that he was so street with his pit bull.
I think
feel you.
I think the Madden twins were literally me and Duncan, weren't they? Yeah, that's why, because I'm not a great actor. So I had to be one of the Madden. I might have been Benji. That's probably why he wasn't more street. But I mean, we are all, our voices are everywhere. The impressions that are good are mostly Duncan. The ones that are bad are usually me. Yeah.
Were there any hard impersonations that you had to do, Duncan, that you were like, I got to go back and like listen to the music to do this again?
You know, I think we had talked about this whenever we would bring someone in to do one of these like really small roles with 2 or 3 lines where we'd say, okay, listen to their voice, see how it feels, and then throw it away, because there's an uncanny valley, right, of like, of course, Tom DeLonge, we wanted the person playing Tom to study that voice, the inflection, the affect that he has. He does all of these weird little things that are just counterintuitive. But with playing people that really exist, if you try too hard, then the conceit goes away. I think it crashes even harder to the ground than if you're just sort of like playing it flat and being like, yes, this is me, Billy Joe Armstrong. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, you try to pick up on like one of the maybe little quirks that they have, but at the end of the day, I think we were just sort of like, people don't give a shit. It'll just be funny. It'll just be funny that we make them say these things, not say them like them. Like,
yeah, it's like capturing the essence is more important than like being, you know, verbatim.
Yes, it's like a caricature artist, but with your dialect.
Yeah.
It was a great caricature, especially the Billy Joe Armstrong, especially the side episode with him and George
Oh.
W. Bush.
Billy Joe Armstrong. Billy Joe does not have the same nasally speaking voice that he does singing voice. His voice is a little like softer and clean in real life, but to make it sound like him at all, you have to do absolutely everything through the nose.
I mean, I don't know if you'll take this as a compliment, but it kind of reminded me how Simpsons do the caricatures.
Totally.
They didn't have the voice actors. I mean, it was enough because like Billy is a very serious person,
Totally.
pretty much. So it's kind of hard to enjoy that and try to remember everything. I also love the episodes where you guys were talking about the show itself. I mean, I think you guys only had one. I wish you guys had more. Where you went over the sound about the toilet, the porta potty.
Mm-hmm.
That was so much work for that sound effect. Like, how did you even plan it? Or were you just like, I'm just going to hit random buttons and see what happens. And then I'm going to like organize it that way.
Yeah, I mean, making that episode was really crazy because it's actually really hard to explain the process. So much of it is, it's a really interesting exercise for me to try to explain like the creative process. And yeah, so much of it is throwing shit at the wall and like you're pulling from these banks of different component sounds and then just like, I don't know, it is interesting. Basically, the thing that I do pre-plan that I'm not just kind of like winging is I like, if you can picture, like I'm looking at a screen where I'm assembling these audio files and from left to right, that's like time passing left to right. I like make these vertical lines like markers and then that is my like skeleton for it. So like the porta potty thing, I would make like a bunch of vertical markers. The first one being like jumping in and then falling in and then being underwater and then coming up from the water. So like just using that as an architecture and then just messing around, seeing what sounds good. What's the term post irony? Where it's like, have you heard that? I remember someone talking about this before, but it's like when you're so ironic about something that you like just there's no irony anymore. You just like start liking it. I have that awareness. It's funny. It's like people with pop punk. It's like that too. But anyway, I feel like I have that awareness with. I feel like what we did here was like exactly that. Like we did a really silly idea and did it as just to the best of our ability. Andy, can you think of any jokes that you didn't get into the script that you love? Off the top of your head.
Well,
I still love the violin.
Totally. I mean, they're all like inappropriate in some way, but I mean, the one that
the violin thing was great. And the person who helped us, one of our recording engineers, Cadence Hira, was a violin player and ended up just tracking that and we just like threw it in and it worked great. That was so cool.
Oh, that's so cool. I mean, were you guys worried that they would kind of find out and be like, what you guys doing?
Well, that's the funny thing is that we were very much in the beginning of like the very beginning of the process. We were like, let's really make sure people don't hear about this until it's like out because we are not about to get a cease and desist after like 6 years of work, you know? But it has, in various ways, we've heard that it's reached various people in the pop punk scene and they've all been like incredibly supportive and happy about it. That's what I'll say for now. But they've all been very, very nice about being mentioned or you know having truly just having the attention on the scene and this genre again. You know, because that's what it is. It's like a reinvigoration of this music in this time period that we love so much.
And we have faith. We have faith that the energy that we put into this project, the love and all that is conferred, and it's not gonna. Like people know that this is with a good heart, and it's because we grew up with them.
Yeah.
So
1,000%.
I think that's come back.
It definitely came off as positive. I didn't get any negative from it. If anything, it made me want to go back to the CDs and then realize I don't have a CD player anymore. So thank goodness for YouTube. But if anything, this is kind of like almost the pop punk version of Weird Al's stamp of approval. So I hope that's what people feel about it, if anything
That's
else.
actually interesting, talking about Ben, right? We talked about, I think, really early in some of the new songs for this version, because Pop Punk High, like, is a little bit less like this in terms of like the presence of the actual bands being around, in character, on stage. Like, there's a presence of like familiar music that you want, right? Where it's like, I want to be able to listen to a song and be able to name 3 bands that it sounds like. But also in that process, it was like, let's stay away from parody, because original music and like homage, I think, is much better for a bigger dramatic story. And like, I think that's like, Andy wrote over 200 pages for this, you know what I mean? Like, Ben wrote, 15 plus songs, at different lengths. But that idea of let's not parody is, I think, a big part of the sort of philosophy of the music in the world. I would say.
That was my next question. So Ben wrote the songs?
Yeah.
Yep.
Ben, they're awesome.
Thank you.
I loved every single one of them. My neck hurts from headbanging. That was so much fun. I think you did a great job capturing the spirit of pop punk. And exactly what Duncan said. Very similar, but not exactly it. So I got to give you 1,000 million kudos for that one.
Thank you.
How do you go about writing that song, but without copying? Like, it's too easy. When you like hear the music so often, I bet you like want to naturally fall into like the similar rhythms.
Yeah, I mean, that's this is why I felt like uniquely qualified to write this exactly what we were talking about. Not parody songs in the genre, but original songs in this genre that were kind of like an homage to this time period. Because it's so in my bones. Like, this kind of music is my musical foundation, and like that's how I first learned to play music and write songs and stuff like that. So, but in terms of the process of making songs, what was so great about the 3 of us, I think, as a dynamic, was like, I just think we, at least from my perspective, we found such a great balance where it was like we had these conversations about the larger story, where we're all present for it, and Andy had like a great instinct to know when he had like gotten enough information, was like, okay, I'm gonna take this conversation, which is really productive. I'm gonna go write and figure that out and go off.
We would just like get up and go, okay, I'm gonna go write and disappear.
Exactly, but that kind of like knowing when to like separate and then like each person kind of do their thing was really great, and a really I don't know, that was a really interesting part of the process. I feel like we learned a lot about that. But same thing for me, like having these conversations where we decide, what does this song need to communicate? What are maybe some potential hooks? Like, I remember the conversation where Duncan came up with the idea for Bitch Mom as a concept of a song. It was like, maybe it's like, it's that weird kind of like possessive thing where like, she's my mom and I love her, but like also she's a bitch, but only I can say that. Like, it was literally just us riffing, and then like, no one calls my mom a bitch but me, like came out of like hook, like that's the hook. And that was all in conversation.
And the callback too, like, what did I just say? I also thought of what was it, Euro Trip, when I heard that song. It made me think of
Scotty doesn't know that song.
Scotty doesn't know.
That song is still so good.
I love that song.
Yeah, what hit wonder, Lustra.
Did you guys have any jam sessions with these music? With these songs?
The only one that I can think of is one that was unsupervised by Andy, where Ben and I wrote the bus driver song, which literally was like going to Andy being like, please, can we let the bus driver sing a song? Can it be, you don't get to edit it.
The 3 of us play this game where it's called Andy's the Dad. That's the name of the game. And me and Duncan get to indulge our infantile fantasies of having like this father figure that tells us when and when we can't do things. And then Andy gets to act all like, don't put me in that box.
So if you guys were a pop punk band, Andy would be the drummer. Would Ben be the guitarist and Duncan the singer?
Interesting.
race it?
I don't know. Ben has the most real life band experience out of all of us. I would say bassist for me, but that's based on bassists I have seen in movies probably.
Which
I don't
movie in
even know. I'm
particular?
like thinking of like I don't like that thing you do, which is like not even like a real recent like School of Rock. Oh my god, Duncan and I just saw the girl.
That was not the movie I thought you were saying.
Duncan and I just saw the girl who was the
The School of
bassist in
Rock?
School of Rock in a local. It wasn't a local theater production; it was a professional theater production. But it was a local theater. We saw it locally, but
Local to you.
yes,
Right.
yes.
And it's funny because listening to the podcast coincided with me reading an article about how pop punk is still around, but it's different. And like they consider Machine Gun Kelly pop punk and a whole bunch of other people. And how do you guys feel about that being part of the OG group with pop punk? Do you agree? You're like, let it grow, or how do you feel?
As if anyone has any control over that.
Isn't
like,
that
should we let it
amazing?
go? Should we let it grow or should we not let it grow? Funny.
Or do you think the media is just too lazy to label it something new?
Oh, I don't know.
I mean,
Who cares, you know?
yeah, it sort of begs the question: what is pop punk? And like to have to define it, as I said, like if it's aesthetics or is it a set of values? I mean, and these are literally conversations we had when we were making the show. Like, what does it mean to be pop punk? What does like Derek aspire to be? What are actually those values of like, diffidence to authority, of sort of like this rebellion towards no one, just generalized feeling. But I mean, if you're literally gonna be like, it has to be like this sound of this kind of distorted guitar with, in a 4-5-piece band with these sort of strict limits, like no. But if it's just like the ethos of we want a countercultural, punk music that's palatable to a wide audience, like of course it's pop punk,
But I think it's just as long as it has a heart of rebellion, it's a catchy song, it's
Right.
pop punk to me.
It's interesting. Pop punk falls into one of these cool, really big buckets of music genre that's like that era defining, right? Because like, if I were to say rock and roll, like, I think our minds all go to similar places in like decade and sound, like rock and roll, the term, right? Not like rock. And rock, I can even hear another time period and certain genre, but things like that. Like there's the semantic actual meaning of pop punk is gone and I think will never be again. That doesn't mean things can't sound like it and be like it, but the same way like we have post-punk and all that, everything like this, like I do think it stands alone for what it was saying, who was saying it, how they were saying it, and visually. Like I think those 4 things were really specific to a time period. If you're saying he's recreating pop punk, more power to him. But like I think there's a difference between like what he's doing, what Machine Gun Kelly is doing, and like what Olivia Rodrigo does with influence of pop punk, and would never ever be like, this is pop punk music. She'd be like, no, I love Who Killed Avril Lavigne. I love Avril Lavigne.
I love asking this question because there is no right answer, and there is no answer. And it's just fun to explore it because it's just so fluid now, what everything is. So I think it's always funny when people say that's not pop punk. This is pop punk. I'm like, there is no such thing. And it goes across all genres. So I bet you guys have received those kind of questions before or will receive those questions again, since your whole podcast is about pop punk. And yet it's not.
Totally. I mean, it's a big tent. I think there's a lot of space in it, and tried to show that in the show.
Because other than the pop punk part, it's a great science fiction story.
Totally.
I am a sucker for time travel, even though it is through a porta potty.
Totally.
But I mean, I have to go with the heart of the matter, and that's Miss Avril Lavigne herself. Now, of all the pop princesses that we had during that time, punk pop princesses, why her? Why no other leading singer for another band? It could have been Paramore.
Totally. I mean, Haley had a slight cameo, a small cameo in the show, but it was frankly just because of the conspiracy. It was the power of the conspiracy that was so central to the plot that made her like this, mythical supernatural figure who had these powers. That was our explanation of how the rumor came to be, is that Avril's truly this otherworldly being.
Do you think if Tom DeLonge heard the podcast, he would agree with it, considering his affinity for conspiracy theories?
I wonder what he would think about it.
I think
I mean, he would.
if he got upset about anything, it would be about the way we portrayed aliens. It would not be about the way we portrayed Blink-182.
Yes.
Have you ever imagined a one-on-one conversation with him on aliens and how that would go?
I would love it. I would have so much fun. I love conspiracy theory stuff, and I would just love to pick that man's brain. I mean, he's very passionate about it. He's done a lot of research. He's not some Johnny come lately on the UFO game.
Could you guys share an underrated pop punk band that people should really listen to that you don't think they do?
The deep cuts here.
Oh yeah. Okay, let me actually try to find underrated. Like,
I was gonna say, like, my underrated band is probably like mega famous Ben, because he's got inside scoop.
Okay. It's a great band, UK band called Goldblum, all one word.
I haven't heard that name in a long time. Goldblum.
Yeah. There's another, like, really small, but I love their songs.
I mean, if people want a band like bands today that are doing maybe something close to pop punk than what Machine Gun Kelly is doing, it is the new Brit, like, post-punk stuff that's being made by, like, 19-year-olds. So there's a band called Bilk, B-I-L-K, that rips. And it's like everything that embodies pop punk, because, again, they're talking about things that they're mad about, like when they're writing the song. And they're like teenagers. And so they don't give a shit. I mean, literally, that's what we're circling around. They just don't give a shit. So Bilk is awesome. I love.
Do you have one song to recommend off the top of your head?
CM2. They even are like, because they're influenced by the Streets, that like rap group from England as well. Like, they're shouting and speaking their lyrics in a way that's like similar to pop punk too. I don't know if they have the same like soaring elements, but like, yeah, CM2 by Bilk is totally rips to me.
I mean, all transparency, that question is being selfish because I love adding more music to my collection. Actually, I should have asked this question before, so I'll just seek it in. Of all the things that you guys recorded, which one of those was the most improvised and made it into the podcast?
I don't know. There's a lot of improv. It's like very structured improv. I would. Oh, I know what it is. It's that alien voice that Ben would lose his mind for.
Wait, can you just?
Sometimes when you
I think that.
Can you give the listeners a preview of the voice just right now?
Sometimes
it's so
you
funny.
Come up with something in your head and you know it's so good that you don't want to do the voice until you're really doing it. And especially when we were first recording, Ben was like setting up and we'd get these one-off parts. And I just try to make Ben and Andy laugh. And so there's one alien character that was like the torture expert.
Yeah.
Carmine. And so
yeah, his name is Carmine, yeah.
So his voice, because it was like, okay, if the voice is like a cube, to find different alien voices within your vocal cube is like, okay, put one up here, put one down here, put one in the front center, put one in the back left. And so like this one is so far back deep in the corner of the vocal cube. And he's like this. Okay. I'm trying to remember what he says.
Strap your eyelids.
Yeah. Wow. You've made it to the chamber of torture. You're going to have to strap open your mind and your heart.
But that's the kind of voice you want to hear when you're being tortured.
Totally.
That was fantastic, Duncan. Thank you for that wonderful preview. That was amazing. And I'm going to ask another kind of sort of weird question because it is a science fiction podcast. What science fiction books do you guys recommend?
Ooh, oh my God, what's it called? Ursula K. Le Guin, The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. Fucking rips. It's really good.
That book ripped.
Really does. It
That's like the most
absolutely
pop-punk way
rips.
of saying that, too. Ursula K. Quick rips.
Dude, it does. Check it out. Genderless world, really way ahead of her time. She's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, you need to do book reviews like this. I demand pop-punk version of book reviews.
Big sci-fi influence for this was Galaxy Quest. I think a lot of the science fiction stuff that the three of us intake are like through another genre. I think that's fair to say. You know, the tropes and stuff that other TV shows and movies have taught us about sci-fi.
Let's see. And then absolutely final question. Will there be a season 2?
Ooh, we'll have to see. That's all I can leave it with. I mean, it's a pretty closed story. I would say it would have to be a big departure from Derek's story in order to get a season 2, just because the first season did end so conclusively. But never say never. You know, who knows what the future holds.
Or would it be like an anthology?
So that's what I mean.
Anything can happen.
Anything could happen. Who knows?
Anything could happen. Anything.
Well, thank you so much, you guys, for taking the time to do this interview. I really do appreciate it. I absolutely love the podcast. I have yelled at everybody I know who mentions they listen to podcasts, to listen to this. I don't care what music they listen to. It is hilarious. So I think you guys did a great job. So thank you for all your work. Thank you for organizing sound effects through a porta potty, going to the weird cube side of voices. It was all worth it. So thank you so much for doing all that. And I hope you guys keep doing it again.
Thanks for having us, Tony. It's been super
Thank
fun.
you so much for having us.
Thank you.